Hello, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Caroline Savage at Princeton University. I'm flying today without my co-conspirator and better half, Rochelle Haddock, who I think is actually skiing right now. I forgot if I might have made that up, but I think she mentioned she was going to be out for something that involved snow, which I'm really glad we're heading away from over here in New Jersey. So welcome to our Campuses Lab community practice call for April. Today, I'm really excited that we have longtime community of practice members, Megan Schneider and Emily Quinton, here to tell us about Portland State University's Living Lab program. Before we launch into their presentation, though, I just kind of wanted to check and see if anybody has any announcements or anything you want to share with the group. I know we have at least one. Sophie, can I put you on the spot to share with us right away? And if other folks have other things to share they can think?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just a short message for all of you. And Viviana talked about it the last call. It's just about an event that may be interesting for us. So it's the sixth annual international conference on sustainable development. It will be held on September at Columbia University in New York City. So we just want to promote and to promote this conference, and maybe some of you may be interested to submit to an abstract. There are a lot of topics on this conference, and there is one topic which is breaking down silos in universities, imaginative interdisciplinary approaches to sustainable development research, education, and practice. So maybe it will be interesting for some of us to submit an abstract, and the deadline for submission for abstract submission is the 1st May. So I can just send on the chat the link, and maybe you can just look if it's interesting for you.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks so much, Sophie. Yeah, the link in the chat box would be very much appreciated. And I think,
okay.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Sophie? All right, and I know Kurt Borth also has an announcement from University of Alberta. Kurt?
Thanks, Carolyn. So I just want to talk about the upcoming conference in Montreal, May 23rd to 25th. And it's put on by two organizations, the Canadian College and University Environmental Network, the CCUEN, and for the first time ever, they're joining with the Canadian Alliance of College and University Sustainability Professionals. So it's the facilities professionals side meeting with the academic side, and the theme of this year's conference is Campus as a Living Lab. So it's called the SHICA Conference, Sustainability in Higher Education in Canada. I'll put the link, and hopefully if anybody's interested, they will register. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks so much, Kurt. And if you want to share the link in the chat box as well, we can do that. And I'll send both of these out again with the notes and slides from today's meeting, which we can get into soon. Does anybody else have any announcements they want to share before we dive in? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, I'm pleased to introduce Megan Schneider and Emily Quinton. They are going to tell us about Portland State University's Living Lab program. So they can tell you much more than I can, but I can start by saying that PSU's Living Lab program matches motivated faculty and students with university staff to work on projects that meet PSU's campus sustainability goals. And their program bridges the gap between educational opportunities and improved campus operations by bringing together a diverse team of campus stakeholders to solve a problem, explore an applied research question, or ignite an initiative that assists the university in achieving its sustainability goals. So with that, Megan and Emily, take it away.
Thank you, Caroline, and hello, everyone. Thanks for listening in today. We're really excited to tell you about our program. First, we'll just introduce ourselves and a little bit about our roles here at PSU. Megan, you want to start?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Megan Schneider. I work here at PSU. I'm in the Facilities and Property Management Department, and I was hired on last year as the Education Coordinator. So part of my role is with the Living Lab team, which we'll talk about further, and I also coordinate other programs specific to facilities, like we do tours, volunteer engagement, so that's what I do.
And my name is Emily Quinton. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator in the Campus Sustainability Office. The Living Lab program is a portion of my role there, and similar to Megan, I do other kind of education programming, including also tours, new employee briefings, working on kind of green office programs, and then some other work around renewable energy planning and green leasing planning right now. So today we will give you a little bit of background about PSU as an institution and what sustainability means here and who's working on it, and then provide a little bit of context and background to understand how we got to where we are right now with our Living Lab program, and then kind of dive into the actual mechanics, provide some examples, and then present some challenges and opportunities that could perhaps help frame some of the Q&A at the end. So Portland State University, we are a large public institution located in the south end of downtown Portland. We have a dense 50-acre campus, which provides a unique and sometimes challenging space for using our campus as a living lab. We do not have any satellite campuses, so all of our 28,000 students and about 7,000 employees are all housed here. It's a very busy and dynamic place. There are some things that make PSU unique, in particular to the other public institutions within Oregon, and that we do have a very diverse student body. We also have average age of student of 26, which kind of represents the large non-traditional student population here at PSU. Our campus is probably the busiest transit hub in the state, which is great, and a lot of alternative transportation modes being used to get to and from campus by our student and staff populations. And our sort of motto here at Portland State is let knowledge serve the city, so that really provides a nice backdrop for community-based learning in general and for the Living Lab program. So we're really lucky here at PSU that we have 3 organizations working on sustainability, or who are specifically charged with sustainability, in addition to many others that are doing amazing work as well. The Institute for Sustainable Solutions, or ISS, you may have heard of them. They have some really great programs. They kind of function like a nonprofit sort of under the umbrella of PSU. They were formed by a large grant about 8.5 years ago, and they are really working to take the innovative and excellent research and academics, enhancing that within the campus, and then applying that to the local community and vice versa. The Student Sustainability Center, or SSC, is the main venue for students to build leadership and professional development skills through the vehicle of sustainability-related service. So they have a number of leadership positions within their office and also volunteer groups. So for example, students work on waste reduction, they maintain our campus apiary, our bees, and do a lot of other really interesting work around cultural sustainability. And so they are under the student activities and leadership body here, so kind of under a different body than either of the other offices. And then the Campus Sustainability Office, CSO, who I work with, we're really focused more internally on operations, policies, and really working within campus departments and stakeholders to make sure that we are sort of realizing our institutional sustainability goals through our built environment, through our programming, and through our planning processes. And 2 of these 3 organizations, ISS and Campus Sustainability, work together with the Facilities and Property Management Department to facilitate the Living Lab program. So This table shows, our 3 organizations and a little bit about the role that we play. We have a core planning team of 5 people, 2 from campus sustainability, Megan from facilities, and then 2 staff from ISS. So my role with the program in CSO is sort of kind of the lead sort of program manager in terms of bringing together this core planning group and working on documentation, website. So, a portion of my staff role goes to supporting the program. We also provide a small materials budget, sort of in the range of a couple $1,000s a year. Sometimes those materials are being purchased by the actual staff departments, but might be supporting software for GIS or materials, water quality testing, and other kind of material needs for the Living Lab projects. Facilities and property management, so Megan helps to facilitate the program as well, and in addition to me, kind of acts as a broker and a liaison to individual projects, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. FPM has committed basically a half FTE of budget to kind of supporting the staff capacity of this program. And again, as I mentioned, also provide some of the material support. And then the Institute for Sustainable Solutions, they are very much so our conduit to faculty, potential faculty partners with this program, as they work a lot on the academic side more than either of the other 2 offices. So they're helping us to understand, who might be a good fit to address a certain project, and kind of bringing together various resources from their other programs. So, if we're working on, say, something related to our institutional climate action plan, and they're really sort of in tune with what the city is doing, and so it's kind of a, bringing the best practices across what's happening external to campus into campus. And ISS has been providing some funding to support people, so they have provided these service learning awards and other funding to faculty and students to support their kind of added time taking on a Living Lab project. And then they also provide the funding for the summer interns that we will talk about. So kind of diving into the program itself, a little bit about the background. So Living Lab here and what it has looked like before has pretty much always involved campus sustainability and the Institute for Sustainable Solutions. And kind of the first sort of iteration to speak of was referred to as the solutions generator. This happened long before either Megan or I were here, so we weren't too involved with it personally, but this was a more student-run program that had a kind of a mini grant component to it. There were a lot of ideas, some of which were not great operationally, and there were some challenges with this program in that there was, there was nobody in the role of the sort of broker liaison, and so my understanding is that, sometimes students would go directly to staff, and it created some tension in terms of goals not quite being aligned. So that kind of fizzled out a little bit, and the kind of core members who maintained a role in Living Lab really realized that there needed to be a focus on quality and not quantity when it came to projects. And so being totally okay with the idea that there might be a term when there's just 1 or 2 projects going on, and that's fine because they're really quality and we have all the support in place to make sure that students and faculty feel successful. So the program now, it's kind of the current iteration has been going for 2 to 3 academic years, and there have been about 45 projects engaged during that time. And again, it's sort of a smaller, more focused management strategy. We just have those 5 members of the core planning team, and it used to be a larger group. And we do have a strong kind of preference towards staff-generated project ideas. So that is something Megan will talk about a little bit more, but that's kind of the kind of big picture of where we're at right now.
Great. So hi, everyone. I'll talk sort of a little bit more about the program as it is now. As was introduced earlier, the Living Lab program here aims to match faculty and students with staff to work on our goals to achieve sustainability here at PSU. So we have some sort of outcomes, things that we hope to achieve through this program. A big one as sort of, you know, in our catch line, we'd like to bridge the gap between operations and academics using the campus as a lab, our buildings, our spaces, our landscaping, and using those spaces to support learning. The learning we often try to provide as it's a lab is hands-on and real-world experience for students. So some of that, while we do have a lot of community-based learning, it's pretty well incorporated, especially into undergraduate programs. You know, there's still some programs that don't always have as much hands-on learning. So we aim to help fill that gap when we can. We, you know, by choosing staff projects, we, you know, like to support staff needs, help them with projects that they might not have time for. So we improve campus sustainability by that. And also the other side of this we see is, you know, if faculty want to provide hands-on learning, we have projects that students can do on campus instead of having to leave campus. It helps faculty achieve their learning goals or their academic goals as well, their learning outcomes for their students. And then we also see it as a way to springboard sustainability work on campus. So again, so maybe a staff person wants to work on a project but doesn't have the capacity to bring the stakeholders together to do so. We provide a platform to do that, to bring people to talk together, to start working on these projects sort of, you know, one at a time. Maybe we're looking, you know, at our climate action plan. We'll start with one portion of that with the student project and see where it goes. And we can also, you know, by using students, they can help develop programs through their projects and, you know, create more opportunities for sustainability at PSU. So from there, we're going to talk about sort of how this looks, so how we actually go about doing these projects. And as I say at the bottom, so we have this idea sort of how this looks, and then things just happen, like it's the real world, and we're opportunistic, and if something comes up that we hadn't planned for, then of course we'll do that project. So this is ideally how it happens, and we just want to, you know, make it clear that it doesn't always happen this way by any means. So you know, and this is also, I want to say, like somewhat loosely defined, like we have this sort of linear process that we go through, but we're actually sort of, and one thing we'll talk about a little bit later is, especially the start of the process, we're looking to maybe hammer that down a little bit more. So we usually start, as we said, with getting ideas from staff about projects that they'd like to do, and this can come from, you know, a variety of things. Maybe, you know, CSO has check-ins with other staff and facilities or planning, seeing if there's ideas that come up there. People are on committees, like for our Green Evolving Fund, our campus sustainability director hears about projects ideas there. We have a running project list that we've developed from a couple different avenues that we'll talk about later. And then also, there are some times when we do, when we're more opportunistic and take on projects that are proposed by faculty or students. So that's the first step. We gather these ideas for projects. We have a project profile that once we have an idea, we get together with staff or the people who've proposed the projects to fill out. And we actually borrowed and adapted the profile from the UBC Seeds program. So, and I think when I started last year with the Living Lab, we had just started to use it, and it's really great. I'm sure we could put it on the drive if we want. It sort of helps to scope, define deliverables. Sometimes Emily or I draft the profiles, sometimes the staff themselves do. Whatever we do, we go over it at least one or two times with the staff to sort of hammer out what exactly they want from a project. From there, once we have a completed profile, we send it out to faculty to see if it aligns with any of their academic needs for the next term. And that's where ISS, the people from ISS come in that are on the management team. They have faculty lists, and they're really in tune to what people are interested in. And so we'll rely on them, ISS, a lot for that. And also, you know, one of the projects last year we did, I just emailed the professor and asked if they're interested. So also a couple different ways we go about that. From there, once we have an interested faculty, we come together, we just sort of vet, scope the profiles, and this really depends. We'll give some examples, and this process can include a lot of different iterations of the profile where we're matching the staff project to the needs of the course, or maybe we just have this profile that's very design-oriented and it just gets sent and the professor and students pick it up from there. So this, again, is somewhat loose, but it just is, we usually at this point have a meeting with the staff and faculty, bring them together to talk about the project and how it looks, and we go from there. And then once we have the profile hammered down, once we have the staff and faculty on the same page, that's really what we're doing in that step, we launch with the students, and that usually involves a kickoff meeting. So let's see. Once we, that's the profile on the right side, probably a little hard to see, but yeah, so once we start a project, we have the kickoff meeting. Usually the participants, the students, whether it's a group or an individual student, from there work directly with the staff partner. We are still playing that sort of coordination role. Like, I like to be included on emails and I like to be on meetings, but ideally with the profile and with the vetting process, we've set it up so that the people can just go and run with the project and work together. Usually we do definitely a final presentation or workshop. We like to have that done. So we're on quarters at PSU instead of semesters, which is short. So if we have projects that do span 2 quarters, we like to do a mid-project presentation to make sure that the students are still working on what the staff wants. So it's usually a good place to come together and reevaluate and then continue on for the second quarter, the second term. We have our deliverables that are defined. Sometimes that's defined by the course. When we work with courses, you know, that will align with their final report. Sometimes we define them ourselves, and they can also, I think, change throughout the process. So, and we'll usually just see how that goes. So what we do, and it's usually Emily or myself as liaisons on the projects, we just provide general project management support, make sure that people are staying in touch, staying on timelines. If there are other sort of stakeholders that students come upon that they need to be engaging with in the process, we'll connect them. If they need to go, you know, we have some engineers working on water testing right now. We'll connect them with the right staff to get into the spaces to test water, access to data, funding if that comes up, and then the other big pieces that we do, the sort of behind-the-scenes paperwork, and communicate the story, get blog posts, take photos, all of that. So who do we work with? So there's many ways that we have worked with in the past couple years since I've been here. You know, what does a Living Lab project actually look like? So we work with academic courses. Again, they can be 1 or 2 quarters or terms. Sometimes we work with just 1 or 2 individual groups from a course, or sometimes we're engaging the whole course in our projects. We have our service leaders or interns who are usually either hired on as interns to begin with, or sometimes we have really motivated students that did excellently in, like, say, a group project from the quarter before, and we decide to offer, you know, them some compensation to keep working on the project, sort of for, you know, the sort of institutionalizing and keeping some movement with the projects. We have 1 credits or independent studies, so students who are working with their faculty to do independent projects, research projects or theses, working with that, more academic side. We have some projects that are ongoing course partnerships, so things that happen every year, multiple times a year. We'll talk more about that. And then finally, we have the faculty and student-generated projects, which I will also talk about in a little bit. They, you know, sort of have their own flow and own situations. So we're going to give some examples now of the projects that we've worked on. So as an example of an academic course we work with, we are in our 3rd year of partnership with engineering capstones at PSU. So we have a couple different departments of engineering, you know, in their final year of study, the students work on a capstone for either 2 or 3 quarters. They're longer engagement than usual. Quarters are really short. We're on, you know, 10 weeks of instruction, so it's a very short timeline for these projects. So it's really nice to work with these engineering capstones because it's a longer engagement. The mechanical and civil engineering projects we've worked on are usually, they're all design oriented because it's their final capstone. And one we worked on last year that was really great, we had a mechanical engineering group that was looking at doing the preliminary background research and design for a standalone HVAC system in one of our buildings that has some very specific and particular cooling needs because it's our biology building. There's some like interesting labs in that building. And it was proposed by some of the people on our Green Revolving Fund, and based on the background research that the students did, we've actually gone forward with the project. It's being funded through the Green Revolving Fund. We have a professional engineer working on the design, and it will, you know, they're working with the Energy Trust of Oregon to move the project forward. So that was a really great project we did last year. I'll hand it over to Emily.
So an example of kind of a one-term engagement. So as Megan said, it's a pretty short period of time. So the types of projects that are a good fit for these are, you know, ones that can be have a nice beginning and an end, or an obvious way in which they can be continued afterwards. So this spring term, we're about to launch a project with a graduate level urban studies and planning class. The professor has, it is a public transportation class, and the professor basically agreed to take on a living lab project that was proposed by our campus planning office and our transportation and parking services offices, and he has integrated it as an assignment into the class. So there's an annual commuter survey here that these 2 offices do, and they have tons of data that they do some analysis on, but they're looking for additional ways that they can use that data to inform their work. So we, you know, kind of in that scoping process that Megan described, we brought the faculty member together with those staff partners, and we developed kind of an initial list of potential research questions for the students to take on, which after we launch the project, the student groups will basically, you know, decide a couple that they want to address. They'll perform the analysis and then present that back to the staff partners. And they'll also help us to look at the commuter survey and, you know, consider some additional questions that might be added that can aid more analysis in the future. There's a lot of interest in expanding kind of the analysis and understanding around demographics and equity, and so the staff partners are hoping that the students can help to plan for including questions that will allow for that.
So talking about our service leaders and interns, these are positions that are most often funded through ISS. They have a couple different functions that I sort of went over earlier. They can be to continue applied learning projects. So if we do sort of the background, lay the foundation for a project with students in a course and we want to continue that work, we might hire someone on to do that. Sometimes they're, you know, based just in staff needs. So if it's not necessarily something that's, you know, maybe we've laid the academic groundwork before in a previous course, then there's just some sort of programmatic research that needs to be done. That would be something that we would hire a service leader or intern for. And then we do just offer at least once, or at least every summer, we have an opportunity for an internship that's just, you know, the definition of an internship, applied professional experience for students. So an example of sort of the first kind we work with, this fall we started a project with our landscape supervisor and facilities who wanted to map the landscape beds on campus. So we reached out to the geography and GIS departments and had a couple students helping us sort of do a proof of concept if this was possible, different sort of mapping, drone flying techniques. And we came, you know, we had the final product was this picture on the right, ended up being you know, a pretty cool end product. So we hired on one of the students to continue the work and to sort of develop a manual for continuing this process of mapping our campus, the plants on our campus. And there's some cool sustainability, you know, these are all native plants, so we could potentially, if we continue this, you know the percentage of coverage on our campus of native plants. So those are usually just deliverable-based, sort of whatever needs to get done is what the students will work on in their time. And then the green building interns are the interns that we've hired every summer for the past 3 summers. It's just a recurring partnership between ISS and an architecture faculty who they jointly fund the internships. It's we hire 1 undergraduate architecture and 1 undergraduate engineering student to work together. They work for our capital projects and construction department, sort of doing the day-to-day tasks. That's the professional experience, and they also will engage in a larger research project throughout the summer. So this year they're going to be researching the new semi-passive side of one of our newest buildings, passively ventilated side that we just constructed. So those are a couple different forms of that kind of learning we support. Back to Emily.
So kind of a deeper or longer term version of what Megan just described would be a student taking on a living lab project to meet the needs of a degree requirement like a thesis, a research project, a master's project, etc. So for this example, this is actually my master's project. I'm a graduate student in the environmental science and management program. Before I was actually hired on for my staff role, I decided to take on this project for my master's project, working with campus sustainability as a staff partner. So, you know, this has been a much longer engagement because kind of the pace of work as a graduate student is deep but slow. So in this case, you know, because for my degree, I have certain requirements I have to meet, I was able to work with my graduate committee that includes the staff partner and my faculty advisor to expand the original Living Lab project profile to make sure that it was comprehensive enough to be sort of academically and research challenging in the way it needs to be. So the project has grown from the original needs to find through Living Lab, but I think in a good way that ultimately serves the campus well, I hope. And so my work has been to focus on identifying options for renewable energy procurement and development here at PSU, and then the more kind of academic side through working with my advisor was to engage a group of core stakeholders across our capital projects, facilities, and sustainability offices to develop a multi-criteria decision framework that kind of allows us to score our project options based on a weighted scorecard based on defined values. So kind of the, you know, one of the final categories here are projects that may start originally as sort of a one-term project and grow into something that is more self-sustaining or an annual or a consistent Living Lab engagement. So our campus apiary I mentioned earlier towards the beginning of the call, we have bees on campus. That actually started as a Living Lab project and now lives on its own within the Student Sustainability Center. It is sort of no longer under the umbrella of Living Lab, but Living Lab sort of served as the launching point for that to become institutionalized. Couple of examples of the more consistent engagement. We have a campus tree inventory that was created via two-term Living Lab project in the 2015-2016 school year. And we have a course this spring that's going to be continuing that work. And so that tree inventory is really valuable to our landscaping team as a day-to-day maintenance tool, and then also helps us to communicate the value of our urban forest to kind of internally to stakeholders, but also externally. So again, that is sort of intended to be maintained via the Living Lab program for the foreseeable future. And then we also have kind of a special program that is known as WALI, or the Waste Audit Living Lab experience, that has typically engaged students in freshman inquiry courses across 3 terms involving sort of a pre and post audit or sort, and then some sort of behavior change campaign in between. And so that has been a partnership with a few specific faculty members who see sort of waste as a vehicle for meeting their learning goals. And again, we for the foreseeable future, see us continuing that as a Living Lab program.
All right, and then the final kind of project I want to talk about, and because it's a little different than the other ones, is faculty or student-generated projects. And as we talked about earlier, this is sort of the format of a Living Lab-ish program a few years ago, and we've moved away from that because we found that for sort of institutional longevity, if there's a staff member that is the champion for a project, that really supports a project, there's more opportunity for that project to actually be implemented and to have a positive impact on campus. And especially with some situations where students want to like build something on campus, if they're just going ahead and doing that without staff support, it can cause a lot of challenges. But we have had a couple good examples of a student and faculty generated project, one that we worked on last year. You know, we're open to these ideas with a certain process. We had a engineering capstone that was supported by faculty, proposed. They wanted to build a rammed earth wall, which is the picture on the right. It's a sustainable kind of building material that just uses soil. So we worked with the students in that capstone group to help make sure that this project could happen. And because there was no staff champion, you know, it involves, this is where, you know, our role as liaisons sort of would step up. You know, we have to make sure that they're getting in touch with the right people. You know, it had to be involved with the arts committee that does non-permanent installations. We had to make sure the landscaping was okay with the location. So those were the liaison role of the Living Lab, I think, really comes through with these projects. And the students actually designed and constructed this wall. And a big part of that process was making sure that the engineering department, both the faculty and the department chair, signed an MOU before we built it. So, you know, there's an understanding between all the stakeholders about what is going to happen with this wall. And that was a huge part of the process. So they built it, and the student in the picture, he was in the student group. He continued on with the project this year as his undergraduate honors college thesis, sort of studying structural integrity of the wall. And we're hoping to continue working with the faculty because they've proven to be such a, you know, reliable partner. We might continue to build some more walls in different places on campus and actually potentially do some testing on different kinds of pavement with that faculty. So I just wanted to highlight that because it presents its own challenges and like programmatic needs, but we do want to be able to support faculty and student learning that is on their own terms. It's just a little bit different. So we have, you know, some things to talk about sort of at the end, things that we're working on. Because this iteration of Living Lab is new, we are, you know, still working on general program awareness and outreach, particularly with faculty. We're trying to maybe build some sort of our own connections with faculty by doing faculty presentations. We're sending out information about current projects that are available to work on through student and staff newsletters, sustainability newsletters, making sure our admin knows the benefits of the program, trying to communicate that to them. As I talked about sort of with our project ID and brokering process, we have this idea of what it looks like, but it's somewhat ad hoc. I don't think we're quite at the point where we can have a request for proposals yet from people. So it's sort of right now, maybe we'll have one idea on this old project list we have, we'll take it to the transportation people and they'll say like, that's interesting, we also have this other project we want to work on. So it's a little all over the place and we're trying to think about how we can streamline that. we had a staff luncheon last year where we got a bunch of people together to propose ideas, and it had some value. We added things to our potential project list, but they didn't write their names down with the projects, so we didn't have a way to follow up. So that had some value, but I think, again, we need to streamline that. I think as we've talked about in this community of practice, staff capacity is an issue. How much can we support? And since we're focusing on quality over quantity, I think that helps us frame actually what we do have capacity for. So communicating about the program, what we do, making sure students who work with us even know what the Living Lab is and the role that Emily and I play in their projects. And then again, sort of with the faculty and student-generated projects, how do we find this balance of, you know, we're committing to being good partners for staff, but then also supporting the academic and learning opportunities of the university. So those are some things that we're mulling over programmatically. And currently what we're working on right now, like actually we're developing some assessments. What do we want to assess? Who do we want to assess? How and when? Again, program processes, like the finding what we want to work on. We're revamping our website. One thing that we also would like to work on is sort of a lot of the projects we've done are within the planning, construction, and real estate sort of umbrella. So these very applied engineering projects where, you know, maybe looking to partner with other academic programs like arts, sociology, maybe even business more, and maybe other non-academic departments like our campus recreation, student union building, and that's sort of its own sort of, if we don't have staff projects that would fit an arts program, then we can't really reach out to those faculty yet, but, you know, we're just sort of working on expanding our horizons as a program. And yeah, there's other programs on campus, like we have an EcoReps program that's run through the Student Sustainability Center that does sort of applied research on sustainability as well. So thinking about how we can connect to these other sustainability learning opportunities. Yeah, so I think we have a couple questions. Any sort of thing on those last few slides that anyone has insight on or they're also dealing with, we'd love to talk about in our Q&A. You know, some general questions we're thinking about, like with these program processes, what's our vision for the program? What's next? What do we develop next? As I said, assessment. What are we assessing? Why and who? Thinking about funding, there's probably going to be some changing of the funding, how things are funded here at PSU Sustainability soon, so we're thinking about that as well. Yeah, and then how to open up our program and find different kinds of projects to work on. So, yeah, thanks.
So yeah, well, with that, we'd love to turn it over to Q&A. Again, I'll just flip back to this. You know, these are our ideas we'd love to hear some comments, insights on, but obviously understand that folks may have some questions for us, so this can go however it needs to.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much for such an incredible presentation. Happy to take questions either by unmuting yourself or in the chat box. I have one to kick it off. You spoke to this a little bit already, but I'm just amazed with the amount you guys have been able to accomplish with 0.5 FTE. That's incredible. And I know you kind of talked about managing capacity and what you're taking on. I'm curious about the team approach that you're taking, the slide you had with the 3 different office partners. How much do you think that plays into your success with a 0.5 FTE? And are there other factors as well?
So I should clarify that I guess kind of in total capacity, it is probably more than half FTE. We have institutionalized the funding for that. So it's kind of a line item in the facilities budget, so we know that that's there. But when it comes to that team management approach, I mean, I think it's really vital. We know we have this time to get together to run through kind of current projects, what's coming up, and then to always have some time to be doing some brainstorming on process assessment. There's never enough time for that, but knowing that we have the space to be kind of driving ourselves to think about program improvement has been really, really great. And I think that the size of this planning group, the 5 people, at least from what I've seen so far, is really manageable. And I think there's pretty clear roles. And to be honest, that was in place before I started in my position. So I have to, give thanks to Megan and the Director of Campus Sustainability, Jenny McNamara, and our ISS colleagues for really making that a smooth process. I think that it happened somewhat organically, but I think that also occurred because of there being a larger management team before, and it just wasn't manageable for folks. There were too many competing priorities, and so it seems like things have come out that the planning team is on the same page. Is there anything else on that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just having, the differentiated roles is really helpful. So Emily and I are the ones sort of on the ground doing the most project management work with people, but always having the team there to help provide direction and to help provide those connections, because it would add a whole other layer if we had to find faculty for every project, but we have that extra support from ISS. So, I think the differentiation of roles, and it is a good. Yeah, I don't know if there's so many I don't think I've heard on these calls about the team approach. I feel like it's usually one staff.
Yeah, I think even if you've got parts that add up to one FTE, your model is really different and interesting, and I think really helpful, because I'm one FTE and I still struggle with, capacity for planning and all these things. And so if it's not even centralized in one person who's there full time, I'm really amazed at all the barriers you guys have been able to overcome.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. Feel free to pop up or unmute your microphone. If not, I do have another. So I'm really curious about the experience of doing Campus's Lab through your graduate work and administering the program at the same time. That's not a story I've heard before. What insights does that give you into what both the student experience is like and the administrative experience is like as you kind of straddle both of those worlds?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It is a little bit weird and funny. I'm really thankful to end up in the position that I have been, to be involved in both worlds. I think that for me, this has really helped me to appreciate the level of structure that ideally goes into place before the project even launches, because I think that that actually, I didn't do that as much as a student taking on a living lab project. It felt very, very big, and even though, for the sake of my degree, I had to come up with a sort of a separate kind of project scoping document, a project proposal, basically. It still was sort of high level, and it didn't necessarily drill down as much on timeline, specific deliverables. So it was very open. So I think that I have perhaps somewhat suffered from the lack of upfront planning on the Living Lab project that I'm working on as a student. And so applying that as a lesson to the projects that I'm now helping to launch, and really ensuring that everyone committed to working on it is on the same page and is feeling really realistic about what can get done in the time frame that's available. That's definitely been a part of it. I've ended up having a lot of scope creep on the Living Lab project that I'm working on, again, because there perhaps wasn't as much agreement on what did or did not fall into the boundaries of what was kind of being asked of me. So that's been definitely one of the biggest lessons. And, beyond that, I think the role of playing the role of the broker and the liaison and working with Megan on doing that has been really helpful. So it's actually kind of weird. So I guess when I started the Living Lab project that I'm working on as a graduate student, the person who was sort of in that brokering role ended up leaving the institution. And so I don't really have somebody in that position of just sort of checking in more generally on how's it going, how's the timeline going. And so I sort of, tried to absorb that, and maybe my faculty advisor took some of that on. But again, I think that has perhaps led to me taking a lot longer than I meant to. And so if I can provide that support and work with Megan to provide that support to students who are working on projects, to just be that kind of third party support, doesn't even have to be like, right, that support isn't necessarily technical. It doesn't necessarily deal with the details of the actual project, but it's more about the kind of management pieces. I think I can see why this liaison role that Megan and I play can be really critical, especially if students haven't done a project like this before. Building some basic communication skills, group work skills, how to write professional emails, even as simple as that, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the project management piece, we had a question come through from Maya Patel at U of Florida, who wants to know about how you track all these projects. She says, my greatest hurdle as facilitator is tracking anywhere from 5 to 10 projects happening in one semester.
Yeah, good question. We're definitely not doing it perfectly, but we do have, so since we have this team management, we have a meeting every 3 weeks, and I would say prior to each meeting and or immediately afterwards, Megan and I, we have kind of a spreadsheet for each academic year. So go in and periodically update, really just one tab for status. So that's an internal tracking spreadsheet that lists the project title, staff partner, faculty partner, number of students, and then that status tab would get updated. And that can happen fairly easily since we are coming together every 3 weeks as a group. So, Megan is bringing information about the projects that she's the liaison for, and I'm doing the same for projects I'm the liaison for. So that's one place. And then currently embedded into our one area of our website is kind of a project archive spreadsheet. We actually want to change kind of how we display projects that have happened. It's not a very visually interesting way to display it. It's just a table that you have to scroll down really far on. But anyways, that is right now is serving as the master project archive. And again, it's a really small amount of information that's actually captured about like what was done. So we definitely we want to improve. I think we're not losing anything internally. Like we are, for the most part, keeping things tracked, but how we actually tell that story out there to the public is really limited. So better displaying final reports or visuals that go along with stories would be really nice. I think we have a really hard time like tracking that, like even just to remember to like take the camera to a mid-project presentation or make sure that we can get out when fieldwork is happening. That's definitely an area where we struggle.
Yeah, and our archive, we sort of based off the UBC Seeds library as well. So I just want to mention that. And that is also sort of part of the assessment piece too. So like there's the actual tracking, with the spreadsheet, but then it's like the checking in at the end, like did we debrief that and do we have action items to move forward for the next iteration of the project? So it's not necessarily assessment, but it's what are we doing after the project ends as well that we're starting to think more about.
Okay, I completely disagree about your visual representation. I saw that on your website, and that was one of the things that made me most excited to hear from you guys, was the sense that, right away you've got everything organized on the front page. So I encourage everybody on the call to check it out. But yeah, I completely disagree. I think it looks fantastic. So we have a couple more questions. I know we're getting close to time, but we have 2 more. Michelle Nelson wants to know if you have any examples of faculty research projects directed towards living lab projects. I'm guessing this is kind of the inverse approach to what you're doing now, where the staff seem to kind of drive it. And I know we have this kind of opposite problem too. So yeah, it's always like if you're on one side of the fence, you want the other side. So yeah, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, the one example I gave that was the faculty student generated project. So Evan Kristoff is the faculty who's working on this. He's a civil engineer. He wanted to work with the student Sam to do this rammed earth wall as Sam's thesis, but it was also his research interest. And since Sam graduated, he finished his degree, Evan is going to be continuing this like with some involvement from students that sort of retains that living lab ISS student learning piece. But the other components that he wants to do, like he wants to test different kinds of pervious pavement on campus, and because he's proven to be like such a reliable partner, we want to help him with that, and that's sort of his own research interest that he's going to incorporate into his design class or whatever to get some more students on board. But I think that's sort of the best sort of hands-on example I have of that, where Evan wants to do this research on spaces on campus, and we're like, yeah, we'll support you because this was awesome, and he's reliable and is not going to leave us hanging with a wall that we don't know how to deconstruct. That was a worry.
Yes.
But we have a deconstruction plan, so that's sort of the Emily.
All right.
Yeah.
With our remaining 2 minutes, I want to ask you one more question from Cindy Shea. She wants to know, how do you overcome the need for subject matter experts? Our faculty do not teach architecture or engineering and don't tend to be very applied. That means our one stormwater engineer, for example, gets overwhelmed. Have you thought about ways to augment SME to advise projects?
Well, I guess perhaps one way that we overcome it, or perhaps sometimes don't come to that as a barrier, is since the projects are most often starting with staff, like the staff who proposes the project, they know they're taking on the role of subject matter expert, and so we don't necessarily need that from the faculty side. And within staff, I know Megan's been intentional about calling on a couple of key staff members here in facilities, not too frequently. So like if they worked on a project last year, giving them a term off kind of thing, because they do play such a active role with mechanical systems on campus and energy management, stuff like that, just making sure that they aren't being stretched too thin. As far as the kind of academic subject matter experts, I mean, I think perhaps we benefit from being such a large organization that we have faculty working across so many different fields. We don't necessarily have gaps in our academic programs that would create a barrier. But I think that there's probably times when we wish faculty would want to lend their expertise more, and they're focused on what research they have going on, which is often happening external to campus. And so I think we still have, some work to do in communicating the value of directing faculty research to campus, or at least an offshoot of their personal research being applied to campus, and so that we could better utilize their expertise. Megan, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it sort of gets at the chicken and egg thing of expanding to other kinds of projects that we have. So we've mostly, we've worked a lot with engineers because the staff members that Emily and I work most closely with are the people who are running the mechanical systems. We're in sort of the operations side of the house, and we do have an engineering school. So we haven't really, I think, hit on that yet. And then also sort of the flip side of that is for example, we have a faculty who's an eco-roof expert on campus, and just by being close with her, we've been able to spawn off a lot of projects about eco-roofs. So it's sort of, we've just worked with what we have so far and haven't hit on that project yet, or that problem yet, but I think, I don't know, we're going to have a deficiency in green building faculty and students soon because of the way that the engineering department is going, and it might be something as we expand into different sorts of projects. I would love to do some more qualitative social justice, equity, sustainability stuff. That might be something we run up against.
I love that idea of kind of playing to your strengths is a great concluding thought. Do you guys have any other final thoughts as we wrap up?
So that sounds good to me.
That's a great note to end on. Wow, I couldn't have planned it any better than that. Well, I want to thank you both so much for presenting. I'm not sure if you've been following the chat. We had a couple of folks who had to hop off early and had really great feedback, and are really grateful for your time. I know I am as well. And thank you also to everybody who joined us during this very busy month. Happy Earth Month to all. Our next call is scheduled for Thursday, May the 10th, same time, same place. And I don't know about you, but I will be very happy to see the other side of April. So best wishes to you all for the rest of the month. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much to our presenters again.
Thank you.